Hello again. In this lesson, we'll be talking about punctuation questions from the writing portion of the SAT. Punctuation accounts for about 8% of all the writing material on the test. So someone told me the other day that there are 14 marks of punctuation in English grammar, which struck me as being a pretty small number. Well, rest assured, on the SAT, there's even less to remember. There are only 5 marks of punctuation that you really need to be a master of to do well at the writing section. You need to know how to use commas, colons, semicolons, periods, and apostrophes. If you can use those 5 punctuation marks well, you're well on your way to success. So let's have a look at some steps that will help you out in the punctuation section. First of all, check sentences to make sure that there are no comma splices and that appositives are properly formed. In a second, we'll look more closely at what comma splices and appositives are. Number 2, make sure semicolons have independent clauses on both sides. Third, all colons should have independent clauses before them. And the 4th piece of advice, try not to confuse contractions like it's with an apostrophe with possessive nouns. For example, it's without an apostrophe. All right, hang in there with me. There's a little bit of material to cover. Here we go. The first thing to know about commas is the difference between independent and dependent clauses. An independent clause could stand on its own as a full sentence. For example, this is an independent clause. I worked hard all year in order to succeed. On the other hand, a dependent clause cannot stand on its own as a complete sentence. For example, the following is a dependent clause and therefore an incomplete sentence. Working hard all year. The reason we call it a dependent clause is because we need something else to make it a full sentence. So, where should commas go? Commas can separate a dependent clause from an independent clause. For example, after I went to the store, I picked Chris up at school. However, commas cannot separate an independent clause from another independent clause. This is called a comma splice and creates a run-on sentence. Here's a comma splice that is incorrect. I went to the store, I picked Chris up at school. You might not be able to hear it in my voice, but if we separate those 2 clauses with just a comma, we've formed a grammatically incorrect sentence. Third, commas cannot separate a dependent clause from another dependent clause. This creates a sentence fragment. Listen to the following example. While going to the store, looking for a birthday gift. If you're like me, you're wondering what happened next. This sentence kind of leaves us hanging and never finishes and is therefore a fragment. The next topic involving commas is the appositive. An appositive is a description of something that showed up earlier in the sentence, and it is set off from the rest of the sentence by 2 commas. We have 1 comma, and then the content of the appositive, and then we finish with a comma. Look at this example and follow along with me. The mayor, who had previously served on the city council, declared that the ordinance was unwise. All of the content between the 2 commas here forms an appositive. To test if appositives are correctly formed, we can remove the information between the commas. For example, in the sentence I just read, we could remove all of the information between the 2 commas and the sentence would still be grammatically correct. It would read, the mayor declared that the ordinance was unwise. Still makes sense. If we remove the material between 2 commas in a sentence and the meaning of the sentence changes, or we end up with a grammatically incorrect sentence, the appositive has probably been improperly formed. For example, take a look at this sentence. People who are allergic to peanuts don't eat peanut butter. I should hope not. Anyway, if we get rid of the material between the 2 commas here, it changes the meaning of the sentence completely. It would say, people don't eat peanut butter. In this case, therefore, the appositive was improperly formed and we should just get rid of the commas. All right, the last issue with commas to keep in mind is probably the best piece of advice for the SAT as far as commas are concerned. Don't put commas before verbs or prepositions. Verbs are action words or words like is or was. Commas should never appear directly before or after the main verb of the sentence. For example, check out this incorrect sentence. Tommy jumped over the log. We don't want a comma right before jumped. Also, commas should never appear directly before or after prepositions. Prepositions are position words like by, for, from, or to. For example, this sentence is wrong. Tommy jumped over the log. We don't want a comma right before over. Here's another incorrect example. The group of students boarded the bus. Here we don't want a comma right before of. One last comma rule that you can keep in mind is that commas are basically long, exaggerated pauses. Now, I hesitate to mention this because people read differently than others, and what sounds like a good pause to someone might sound like a bad pause to someone else. But if you read these sentences in your head and put a very exaggerated pause where the comma is, and keep in mind all the other rules that I've just mentioned, oftentimes that will help you narrow down to the right answer on comma questions. All right, let's look at some other marks of punctuation. Semicolons are basically the same as periods. They separate two independent clauses. So this first example is correct. I went to the store. Later I picked up Chris at school. The next sentence, however, is incorrect. After I went to the store, I picked up Chris at school. We can't have a semicolon right after store in this example because then everything before the semicolon would be a dependent clause. Again, semicolons can only separate two independent clauses. All right, our next mark of punctuation is the colon. Colons can introduce a list, an example, or a direct explanation. For example, here's a list. Only 3 things scare me: public speaking, failure, and mice. Here's an example of a properly used colon that introduces an example. His reputation as a thief is obvious. Last week he robbed a liquor store. And the third one, this colon introduces a direct explanation or description. The bald eagle is an endangered species. Pollution destroys its eggs. Notice in all these sentences, the material before the colon is an independent clause, and the material after the colon is a dependent clause or an incomplete sentence on its own. This is the definition of how colons should be used. All right, thanks for hanging with me. Our last mark of punctuation is the apostrophe. Apostrophes often indicate possession. For example, words that end with apostrophe S are singular and possessive. If we said the boy's bike with an apostrophe S on boys, we are indicating that one boy owns a bike. On the other hand, words that end in S apostrophe are plural and possessive. If we said the boy's bike, here boys has an S apostrophe, we are indicating that multiple boys own a bike. One other issue to keep in mind with apostrophes is contractions. Contractions are a way to shorten pairs of words. For example, it's with an apostrophe S means it is, while it's without an apostrophe is a possessive. Also there, T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E is the same as they are, whereas there, T-H-E-I-R is possessive. All right, 2 more minutes and we'll be out of here. I've got 2 questions for you to practice punctuation. Let's try this first one. Before going to sleep at night, my sister sings a song. My brother, he reads first. Well, the problem with the original sentence is that it's a run-on. We've got 2 independent clauses. Before going to sleep at night, my sister sings a song. That's one. And the second independent clause is, my brother, he reads first. Also, that second one just sounds horrible. I think you'll agree with me. So answer A, which is the same as the original sentence, is wrong. We need something that splits this up, if we're going to use 2 independent clauses, into 2 complete thoughts. The only answer that does this is answer C. Before going to sleep at night, my sister sings a song. My brother reads first. Notice that we use a semicolon here to separate it into 2 independent clauses, each of which could stand alone as a complete sentence. All right, one more question for you here. Novice computer enthusiasts may choose from several different computer models. There is one which is best for their particular interests. This is an example of a comma splice. We have two independent clauses that are separated with just a comma. We need to change that. So let's get rid of answer A. Other answers that we can get rid of here would be E and D. Both of these would continue to make this sentence a run-on. We need to make it a properly grammatically correct sentence. The only answer that does that is C. Notice how C turns the second half of the sentence into a dependent clause that depends on the first half of the sentence to be grammatically correct. Let's listen to it. Novice computer enthusiasts may choose from among several computer models, one of which is best for their particular interests. I think you'll agree with me that it sounds much better, it's grammatically correct, and we fixed the comma splice in the original sentence. All right, thanks for hanging in there. That was a long one, but now hopefully you're a master of punctuation and can fearlessly tackle these questions on the writing section. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.